Okay, I've been thinking about my 17-day trip to/through Scotland, my heritage travel trip, HTT, in July 2019, starting the 4th of July and finishing the 20th of July 2019, including travel days. And so I spent one night on the airplane, and then the rest of the nights, so it was 17 days, 16 nights, 15 nights on the ground in Scotland. But 16 nights is like the trip. And I was thinking about, so it was a solo travel trip, and how is solo travel different than a trip with one other person, so a duo trip, or a trip with more people or family or something like that. And so I've been reflecting on that a little bit in I think reflection on my previous solo travel trip, heritage travel to Scotland, is a very good before my Ireland heritage travel trip, because it gets me thinking about what did I go through on that trip and what kind of mindset do I need to be in for my Ireland heritage travel trip. And I was like, well, what was the biggest thing? And there was the sleepwalking and sleep talking and overcoming those fears. That was kind of the biggest, I think the term I decided on was anxiety. And so, anxiety source. The biggest difference, though, I mean, I'm doing everything by myself. And so, I mean, it kind of goes without saying, I suppose. Like, I had been up to that point doing a bunch of solo adventures on my own, so it wasn't necessarily out of the norm. I had also been doing adventures with friends and going out to eat with them. So what am I getting at? Social interactions. Solo travel and social interactions. That is the single travel and social interactions. In hindsight, like, it makes a lot of sense, but I didn't really realize this fully and maybe elaborate it. I talked to my parents about it a little bit, and I kind of I realized it during the trip, but I was there alone, so I didn't talk to people at the places I went to, and then go to a number of places with people, or be like, hey, I'll see you there, and that kind of stuff. So I was on my own, and I kind of like that, especially when going to look at rocks or look at different museums or castles, especially if it was like a Gordon clan castle. I was like, well, this is my family, and if I was with someone, it might not even be like, if I was with family, then it'd be kind of a shared thing, but just trying to learn about it. And I think sometimes I do my best learning as an individual and kind of thinking through stuff on my own. So I think the lack of social interactions was actually very perfect for me in that trip, and I think it will carry over to the remaining 7 of my heritage travel trip series. And so, yeah. See, I don't know if I'm going to get this order, but I've done Scotland, next up is Ireland, then Germany, then Italy, then England, Poland, USA, Norway, something like that, approximately. And so I've got 7 left, and so what do I mean by the social interactions were different? So first off, I got a rental car. So when I was a kid traveling with family, and I've rented cars as a duo, so when I traveled with someone else, I was the person renting the car. Well, when I'm renting the car, I'm the person, when I was with a family, that would be my parents renting the car, and so they would do the interactions. So I would say the solo interaction was more similar to the duo experience because I was the person interacting with, but there was nobody for me to talk to and be like, oh, does this mean this, or anything like that. It was like, it was just me and the person at the rental car. So rental car, and I would say car problem. So I got car problems. Like, okay, so let's say cars, car transportation. So my main, so I guess an air travel. So I'll start with the car thing. So there's the rental car aspect where it's just me. I'm the one inspecting the car when I go to get it and dropping it off. I'm the one walking around the car. It's not, everybody get off, I'm going to go return the car and I'll meet you at the airport kind of thing. No, I had to do it, and it was just me. And then transportation-wise, so that includes getting a flat tire. I got a flat tire in Scotland. It wasn't like I could be like, oh, honey, go deal with this, or have my parents deal with it. I had to deal with it, and I had to be like, I'm in a foreign country and have no idea who to call and stuff like that, and I had to figure out who to call. Should I call this? And then be like, oh, wait, I got roadside assistance. Where's that number? Like, I had to do a whole lot of social interaction that... Well, there's only one person making that phone call. So if I had been there as part of a group or a duo, I might not have been the person on the phone. So I might have had 0 of those interactions. And so the solo travel version of this is intense. Like, there is nobody to rely on. If you're not feeling up to it, then you're not going to get your car fixed. So I had... Or if I wasn't feeling up to it, I wasn't going to get my car fixed. And that was kind of like, this is so stressful. I don't know what to do. Or I kind of know what to do, but I'm not certain. I'm in a foreign country. Does it still work the same here? I don't know. That kind of stuff. So yeah. And so there was a lot of stress and kind of I had to motivate myself to get going, just because it is a foreign country. Scotland was, and so it was just kind of, okay, take a deep breath and then deal with it, because I don't have anybody to help here in person to help me get through this. It's all me. Yeah, so that was, I think, huge personal growth that I was not anticipating. And so it was really good. And then the other part of this is air travel. So like I got questioned going through security on my way back to the United States from Scotland, because I had a little crest badge that had a tiny sword on it. I'm part of the Gordon clan. It was like the Gordon clan crest badge. And there's nobody to talk to afterwards, where I think in the past when that kind of stuff has happened, like when I went to the Dominican Republic and I came back, I bought one souvenir in the Dominican Republic and it had to be wiped down. And like it went through a whole bunch of screening and stuff. And my family was there to kind of like get through that. And we could kind of be like, well, that was strange. There were people immediately there I could talk to and decompress and move on. When it's just me, there's none of that. It's like, my badge and I made it through. So it's a lot, there's a lot more nerves with solo travel than group or duo travel, in my experience. And so that's the, car/transportation/air travel component. And then there's nobody to rely on if I don't know how to find my gate. It's just like, do you know how to do this, or kind of thing? I can ask an airport employee, but then I'm still on performance mode. And I would say that's the biggest thing with these social interactions as a solo traveler, be it restaurants, hotels, ferries. I guess that's kind of transportation. Shops, stores, castles, and sites, like historic sites. All of these places, I'm the person doing the purchasing, the ticket, or whatever. And so the single biggest difference, I'm going to kind of lump the rest of these together, and I'll touch on hotels and kind of, if I want to go on a tour or I want to go sightseeing and the weather's crappy, I don't get to sit in the car and be like, have somebody else get out of the car and go talk with the people in charge and see if it's still gonna like go. Is it still a go kind of thing? I have to do that. I don't get, I realize now that I'm an adult that's like as a child, I had that luxury of getting to stay in the car and not having to get up and do that social interaction, because when it's just me doing that on like every single place I go. It's me having to interact. It is a whole different level of just it almost, not that it feels like performance, but it's a whole lot of social interaction that traveling in a group one does not get. So it's and there's no other group members to fall back on. If one's like, I want to take a lazy day and stay in the car and have my honey bunny go off and check in with this person, and I would they're different groups are privileged in different ways, and children are privileged in one way of they're not like they could be, but a lot of the things, especially like with a rental car, you have to be so old, so a child isn't going to be the one renting the car. There's kind of, at least I see that as kind of obvious. And you have to be 18 years old to rent a hotel room, so there's some stuff like kids can't actually do legally. So yeah, it's going to be the parents doing those social interactions, and so that's one way that children are privileged, is they don't have to do those social interactions. And as an adult, I would say that it's not necessarily a privilege, but it is a luxury. And some people really like that luxury of not being the person who's out talking to people and that kind of stuff. They like to just sit in the car and wait and hear as somebody else checks in for the hotel or stuff like that. There's nothing wrong with that. So I just find that I tend to be the person, even in duos, who checks us in or whatever. I don't know. I'm finding it kind of comfortable. It's not pushing me out of my comfort zone. Neither would be sitting in the car. Hotels is the other one that I'm going to touch on briefly. And maybe eating. So eating alone, there's no one to talk to. So I just had to figure out. I took Hedgie the Hedgehog with me, and I would put Hedgie the Hedgehog on the table, and people would tend to look at that and then not talk to me. Which is like, oh, she's weird. Or better or worse. But that was part of why I brought Hedgie the Hedgehog. Partly was just self-comfort, and partially was I need to figure out how to eat by myself kind of thing. So yeah, that's solo. If you're not used to eating alone, this part can be weird. I didn't buy drinks with somebody at a bar or something like that. It was all just me and the workers and that kind of thing. And then hotels, and this is, I think, the biggest one, because you could do solo travel very different than me. You could order take-in or delivery and not go out to a restaurant and not deal with eating by oneself in a restaurant. That's a choice I made to do that. And then with hotels, there's a lot of people will do Airbnb or VRBO, I think Verbo or something like that. I don't do that. I do hotels, hostels, inns, bed and breakfasts, that kind of stuff. So I am, like, at one of the bed and breakfasts I stayed at, the owners I saw them almost every single time I went in and out of the bed and breakfast. So there is a whole lot of social interaction with staying at a hotel. It's not like an Airbnb or a VRBO or Verbo or whatever it is, where like the owners will leave the keys somewhere and instructions, and you don't have to interact with anybody. Like, there's nobody else staying at the VRBO or Airbnb. You don't have to interact with the owners. It's literally pick up the keys, do your thing, leave the keys in a place, pick up, leave, and you're done. No, staying in hotels is a whole lot more social. And I mean, I'm traveling, and so like I like that environment. I'm not alone. I'm not saying like, okay, I think sitting in the car and making somebody else go check in on something I might call that antisocial. I've been in that position before. It's like, I don't want to talk to anybody, I'm just gonna stay in the car. I would call that slightly antisocial behavior. I'm not saying that Airbnb or VRBO is antisocial behavior. I might put that more as like people who rent a van and drive around the country and then sleep in the van. That's even less social interaction. But yeah, so I guess in the sense of hotels, I'm actually a social traveler because I'm talking to people. And this one's really important. And so are restaurants and kind of all of these things. People have a right to refuse service. So if I'm not, like, I think the biggest example where I was like stressed about the actual social interaction I needed to do, and I really felt that being a solo traveler was I rode this ferry from the Outer Isles to the Isle of Skye in Scotland, and I got to my hotel after midnight. It was almost like 1 o'clock by the time I got my stuff in my room, like 1 o'clock a.m. in the morning, and when I booked the hotel room, I put in the like little any additional information. I'm like, this ferry lands late, I'm gonna be late. It was after check-in, and I was like, I still know it's just gonna be like I know it was like like I put that in there so they could have said, no, we don't want you like to stay here, we won't do that, and then I would have found another place. So I was like, they still booked the room for me, so they still want me to be there, but I'm like, there is like a kind of, I was anticipating a little bit of a, okay, you're still late, this is not the normal check-in hours, and like stuff like that, a little talking to. And I did get that talking to, and so that was the interaction I was most nervous for, because I was like, I was night driving by myself after midnight through rough terrain in a foreign country on highways that weren't lit, and like I was trying to stay awake, so I'm like high on edge, high energy, high nervous, like super nervous, and then like sleep deprived, slightly wired on caffeine, and I need to have a really good interaction. And I realized like it was the only ferry that they had, and so yeah, I couldn't, if I wasn't a solo traveler, I wouldn't have had that interaction. So yeah, I'm gonna kind of end there, and that's an abrupt ending, but yeah, that's solo travel pushes one in terms of social interactions, in my experience, far more than traveling in a duo or a group.